Wild Goose is more than a festival. It's a celebration of love. You can interpret that how you want.
I was going to say, that's... What tent is that happening in? which tent is love? Shane, you've been at a number of the Wild Goose festivals.
Yes, I have.
You have been committed to life.
I'm a golden egg member.
You're a golden egg. And you have been committed to seeing change in the imagination and the lived experience of people in our world. And you've turned your sights recently to making a even more intentional and explicit calling and recruitment for people to join together in the United States to stop the government-sanctioned execution of people.
Yeah.
Sometimes the Wild Goose Festival, it's fun and it's energetic and people enjoy it. It can feel like a small, sometimes underwhelming activity compared to the gravity of government-sponsored execution in the United States.
Yeah.
Well,
one of the things that I like about the Wild Goose is this sense of fearlessness. And the scripture says, love casteth out fear. So there is something about joy and celebration. And I also think that when you read the Gospels, there's some horror stories. I mean, Jesus' execution is this brutal triumph of love over hatred. So Jesus on the cross, I mean, we see this collision of the ugliest things that people can do with the beauty of God's love and grace. And so I think it's good to hold the fact that we are having this wonderful, imaginative, creative festival in a world where folks are getting shot, where people are fearing for their lives as drones fly over them, and where our own government continues to sanctify execution. And for the record, I mean, when I started studying this, I saw that like we can do better than killing to show that killing is wrong. You know, I mean, like most of the world's done away with it.
Yeah.
The company that we have with the death penalties, China, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq. You know, not places known for championing human rights. So that's why I think it's one way that I think one of the things we can do at gatherings like this is talk about real stuff too, and not just ideas and not just creativity, but let's like put some teeth on this thing and figure out how we can fuel a movement that will champion better ways of doing justice than the death penalty and things like that.
And you've written a book about this. We're in July of 2016. It seems very timely, Executing Grace.
Yeah.
I have a sense that you feel like if this book sold a lot of copies and people read it, that the impact would be that people would think and live differently, and that we might see a cessation of United States government-backed killing of people, whether that be prisoners, potential criminals, or people in other countries via war and drones and everything else. Like, right? Like,
I mean, I think what's beautiful is a movement of people of faith and conscience saying we want to stand against killing. Legal, illegal, sanctioned by our government, done by police, done by criminals, drones, whatever. So I think that's, I mean, that's a great starting point.
Like, why is this so, like, in religious traditions, you can go back thousands of years to all the traditions having some edict to not kill.
Yeah.
And yet, in 2016, somebody has to make a full book-length argument that we should stop killing. What do you think some of it's rooted, especially in Christianity, to the fact that there was the death of Jesus?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, part of I got emails that said, I get emails all the time that say things like, how can God be against the death penalty when God used it to save the world?
Yes.
And God killed Jesus, you know?
Yeah.
And so it raises questions about how we understand why Jesus died. It raises some deep questions about race. And so I think, like, to me, the death penalty is helpful because it gives us a concrete way that we can see some of the real fingerprints that slavery and racism continue to leave, bad theology continues to fuel. And some of my heroes have been folks like Christians in Journey of Hope and other groups where they have murder victims' families with the families of the executed saying no to all killing.
Yes.
And it has so much integrity, and it comes out of their pain, it comes out of their faith. But what I'm also encouraged by is there's a youthfulness about Wild Goose, too. And the studies I've seen are like 80% of millennial Christians born after 1980 are against the death penalty. So it's on its way out. Executions are lower than they've been, in decades. So it's on. But I would love to see Christians on the side of making history in abolishing the death penalty, rather than kind of just riding the wave.
Yeah, and I know this is your topic much more than mine, but it feels like even if we stop committing the act and don't change the hearts and minds, then we've sort of legislated our way without changing the impulse where people think that killing someone else is the thing that we ought to do.
Yeah.
Like, even if you don't do it, if people think we should,
yeah,
it seems like we're still stuck there. Like, and so your book and your work that you're doing now, you're not only trying to change the statistics.
Right. Yeah, my starting point is not just political, but it's actually that this is a deep spiritual and moral crisis.
Yes.
And this morning I told the story of Ron McAndrew, who was a former prison warden that supervised executions, and he talks about what it did to him to oversee the death of other people. So I think there's something in us that we know that killing's wrong. We've got scripture that we justify it with, but the more you look, the more convoluted you see that we've made that, and so I'm really encouraged, so I think that festivals like this can be a place where we talk about real substantial things like racial injustice and the death penalty and all these, but folks say to me, even gun violence, it's not a gun problem, it's a heart problem. And I think we can say at places like this, no, it's both.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the laws, but let's talk about the heart too. You know, God changes hearts, but we need to change some laws. We need to think, we've got a voice in our society, let's use it.
Yeah. So I just want to get your quick response to that question that you sort of framed, that people ask a lot, which is, look, God doesn't condone killing, God condones murder, or if it's for the right reason, then killing doesn't become this violation. That's not how you view it. You see it differently.
Yeah.
Say something about that.
Well, I think that understanding that Jesus was executed is a really good starting point.
Yes.
What does it mean for us to identify with one who was executed and had a very
not the
flawed,
executioner,
broken legal process leading up to that, but what I think happened in Jesus is the most wonderful act of divine solidarity, where God is born as a refugee, dies on a cross, and Philippians talks about how powerful that is, like to die on a tree, and why African Americans understood that as Jesus was lynched.
Yeah.
And what it does is we can identify with one who suffers with us, and triumphs over that suffering with love. Colossians also, I think, gives another great framework to where what Jesus did was expose the systems and make a spectacle of them. So Jesus does make a spectacle of death, but it's not to glorify it. It's to absolutely show it for what it is, as the most humiliating, horrific thing that we're capable of. And Jesus still dies with love on his lips. And he, the image I like to use is water poured on the electric chair, that he short circuits that system.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for us as we identify with Jesus' forgiving death, to continue to champion death,
So not to get too deep in the weeds, but I can hear friends of mine saying, but what Jesus didn't do on his lips was say, this is a human violation. In fact, what you have on Jesus' lips is, not my will, God, but your will be done.
Yeah.
So some people have just, those refrains have mixed together into, God is not opposed to me being executed.
Yeah.
That's what they hear. They hear, I'm opposed to it, but God's not, so not my will be done, but your will be done, because God supports execution.
Yeah.
That's not how I read the story, but how do you... When someone, that's what they've heard, I mean, it's been nonstop. They've heard that their whole life, and it rings true to them.
I guess that's why you write a book on it, but I did dig into some of that, because I think that Jesus does talk about the law, though.
Yeah.
And he's building on a tradition that obviously he was with from the beginning, but he says, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I say unto you,
yes.
And he's really challenging some of the ways that we've done justice. That's why he ticks off all the teachers of the law and the, religious folks that were justifying these institutions. So, but in the end, I think that Jesus becomes really the sounding board for how we are to live and to love. And the early Christians were just unmistakable on this. And I have a whole chapter on them, because what's so beautiful about the early Christians is that they speak against killing unilaterally, like without exception, And that's why, anybody that's for the death penalty has the nagging problem of Jesus and of the first few hundred years of execution, or of church history, where they were against executions, partly because they were dying. But then you have folks like Martin Luther and others that really saw the executioner as the hand of God. And I think we've got to challenge some of that that has actually been the moral backbone to the death penalty and restored and like punitive justice and other things. So,
and a lot of people, I think you've helped me to see the connection between war, local violence, individual violence, execution, that it's all part of a whole problem that a lot of us see as separate incidences or stories. And they're just disconnected. Like, we kill good guys, we kill bad guys, that's a good thing. If good people are killed, that's a bad thing. And you wrap it all together.
Like, violence is the disease, not the cure. And when we back up the death penalty and a lot of other ways that we try to use redemptive violence, we actually reinforce the very thing we're trying to get rid of. Like, I look at Iraq right now too. Like, we have the violence that we've done there has perpetuated such violence. It's like we poured fuel on a fire. And Dr. King and others are really helpful with that. Dr. King said, I've came to realize I can't just speak against the violence of the inner cities. I've got to speak against the violence of my government. And that was what made him very unpopular. But I think that a movement like what's happening at Wild Goose can help to connect those things and say, Jesus is why we say Black Lives Matter, why gun violence is an issue for us. But it's more than these hot button issues. It's a value for life that God has made that is so precious that if we allow it to be destroyed, we are destroying a part of God's image in the world. And so we want to stand against, I think Christians, we could make a renewed commitment to be the interrupters of violence everywhere.
So someone should coin some phrase about living by the sword causes you to die by the sword. It just seems like that kind of thing would really ring true for people and maybe solve part of the problem. Shane, tell us a little bit about what your imagination around what Wild Goose could be. Do you have a sense of that at all?
So I think Wild Goose could be a place that refuses to separate things that were meant to be held together. Like you see this in Scripture, like faith and works, or prayer and action. Like I think that they're like blades of a scissors that they need to work together. And what we do, I think, in a lot of church history is we exaggerate whatever we've neglected to the point that we over-exaggerate, we lose another part of our faith. So it's kind of like you run off the right side of the road, you yank the wheel and run off the left side of the road. But I hope that Wild Goose can be a place that says, we believe in justice. We also believe in prayer. We believe that the Spirit moves outside the box. We also believe that things like the Eucharist and taking communion together, things like the sacraments, these are holy things in the church. So God works in the institutions and God works outside the boxes. And so I think this is a wonderful place that could happen.
Great. Thanks for being part of it all.